Okay, continuing on where we left off in terms of the events, significant events that have happened over the last 10, 15, 20 years, coinciding with the 10th hour we spoke about, and the fact that, according to Rabbi Yitzchak in the Medrash Ne'elam, that there are only 16 years left until Techis HaMeisim, resurrection of the dead, which means basically Mashiach has to come before that. Again, this is not a prediction for Mashiach's arrival, it's just basically taking information from the Zohar, the Leshem, mapping them out and just making, adding, subtracting years, whatever, to get a handle on the position we're in historically right now and the significance of all that's taking place. So, one of the, maybe there are a few things, for example, there was the Oslo Accord in 1993, a significant turning point in as much as it shows how basically Israel is becoming the central focus of all the world, and the pressure mounting, anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism, and the pressure on the Jewish people to deal and make peace with people who don't even understand what peace is about, really. They don't spell peace the same way that we spell peace. Basically, we spell it P-E-A-C-E, or shalom, they basically spell it P-I-E-C-E, and taking everything. That's they themselves will tell you that they're not really interested in making peace whatsoever. Their dream remains to be to wipe the Jewish people off the face of the earth and certainly take all the land of Eretz Israel. The world seems to be blind to that. The world seems to ignore that completely, which is maybe part of their own anti-Semitism and inability to deal with reality as you have to be able to be, amiti, to be truthful. But increased anti-Semitism, and we'll talk about that B'ezras Hashem at some point in the near future. Increased anti-Semitism is God's way of telling the Jewish people that history is not simply a question of status quo, and we have to change our perspective and change our way of doing things because it's time to move on. That's usually what it means, going back to Yaakov Avinu with Lavan, that anti-Semitism is a way that the Shemayim tells us that the situation as it's been until now, it may have been good, it may have been pleasant, it may have worked for better for worse, but it's time to move on, and usually there's simanim, and that's what the events, Meisa Shem Haisa Zos, Hinivus Be'inenu, these are things that Kodesh Baruch Hu sends to us, messages he sends to us, that he doesn't have to rely upon anti-Semitism. But anti-Semitism is basically the result of the Shechina pulling out, and the nations of the world responding to us in a way it's natural to them. Halacha hi, Esa's son as Yaakov, as the Medrash Chazal say. It's a halacha, it's the way of the world that they do not like the Jewish people, so therefore they're liking the Jewish people. That's a miracle. That's a nace. That's not because people are civilized and all of a sudden wake up and realize that, we've been unfair to the Jewish people. That's really the miracle of living in Galus. That's the Shechina, the divine presence amongst us, protect us and give us a chance and ability to be able to function and do what we have to prepare for the upcoming redemption. But when the time comes to move on, as Yaakov Avinu himself saw when he was living with Lavan, that all of a sudden the Shekhinah pulls out and that protective dam, that protective wall that keeps the anti-Semitism from affecting us, all of a sudden it starts to crack and to crumble, and as a result, anti-Semitism will once again rear its ugly head, and God forbid do what it does, because the Jewish people failed to listen to the messages when they were actually being given over to us in a pleasant tone. Reminds me of my own, you're raising children, you find this all the time. Please, take this thing to your room. Just a minute, right? 5 minutes later, it's still there. Please, remove this thing and put it in your room. You're being polite, you're being loving, you're being caring, you're being respectful, right? It doesn't get done. After about 5 or 6 times of doing that, you finally say, look, I asked you for it, take that into your room, or there might be a punishment, or you're going to lose that thing. And the child will turn around and say, you always talk to me meanly. You hate me. You're never polite to me in the end. I was, but you weren't listening. Likewise, HaKadosh Baruch Hu talks to the Jewish people in gentle tones because he doesn't want to bring anti-Semitism. When it happens, it's because we failed to listen to the messages earlier on. And that's really what it's all about. So the Oslo Accord is a crack in the dam. It's telling us that pressure is mounting. Hashem does not want to take away Eretz Israel and have us succumb to the Arabs and give away land, as we later on will do in Gush Katif. But we don't appreciate the gift of Eretz Yisrael. After 2,000 years of living in exile, miraculously beyond imagination, the land was given back to us with miracles upon miracles. Yeah, secular, religious, whatever. But the bottom line is the Shkacha Pratis. Historically, the most important things happen often in the most bizarre ways. The ways of Hashem, Kasher Rachman, are very mysterious. We don't always understand why Hashem does what He does. Although there are Sefer Kabbalah and Shar Gilgulim discusses these ideas, why Hashem has to work through the back door very often historically, and things have to, go this way as opposed to that way, and only come around later on, But the bottom line is Hashem gave us back the land. And you look outside and you see the way it's built up, and there are firm communities and yeshivas and Torah being learned like never before. For thousands of years we didn't have that. In Eretz HaKodesh with the Shekhinah, we go to the Kaisel. Anytime you want to, basically, and misspelled by the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, there's work to do. We're still waiting for the Beis Hamikdash, but we have things that we can do today that we only yearn for. People used to just to be able to put their foot on the land and just to die here. To live here was too much to ask for, but just to die here. And today we can live here, and people reject the land as the spies, the Moradlim, all over again, just as was predicted would be the end of history. This is the Rizal speaks about in Shar Gilgulim. Very important to know. Again, these are things we'll talk about a little bit later on, more detail, but the Oslo Accord represents a Kodesh Baruch Hu's way of saying, look, I gave you back the land, and you don't appreciate, you're not using the way it's meant to be used, and you're not coming, you're not living it, there's no yearning to be here, right? So Hashem says, well, let me create the yearning. Let me put you more in a position where you realize what you've taken for granted up until now cannot be taken for granted anymore. So this represents a very important turning point. Of course, the assassination of Yitzchak Rabin in 1995. Also, these are all important turning points which can be looked at and examined, and certainly accelerates the process of whatever is happening. There was a major earthquake in Turkey in 1999 as well. The tsunami, all these things like major events, making the world, think along lines that they had not thought about. Just like the Rambam speaks about how Christianity was a way to bring the concept of monotheism, at least as much as they're able to perceive it based upon what used to be in the past, many gods, that it's a preparation for your Muslim Mashiach. Okay, it's not exactly right, it's not even close to being right half the time, but it's right enough that that people change their way of thinking. Likewise, all the events of history open people's minds up and gets people thinking more along the lines of Messianic era, right? It may not come to fruition at that moment. It may not come to fruition for that decade, but it changes the way people think. And that's the most important thing over here, because that's all part of the preparations for Mashiach to come. So perhaps one of the most important events that did that, right, especially because it came in the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, when the Gemara says in Sanhedrin that that's the year that the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, that Ben David will come, the Mashiach is going to come, you'll hear kolos, voices, and Rashi explains either the shofar blowing a lot, or people talking about Mashiach as like never before, and this event did exactly that. What was that? So, in 1999, as the year 2000 came closer, an old problem gained new attention as the world poured money and effort to avoid the worldwide computer problems associated with the change over from 1999 to 2000. It also happened to coincide with the year 5760, which also coincidentally, right, happened to overlap with all kinds of predictions going back hundreds of years, that would be the arrival of Mashiach, and now we understand that it also corresponds to the beginning of the 10th hour, so certainly it's part of the Messianic period of time, right? So, all of this served to create an atmosphere of doom and gloom that made the topic of Mashiach even more prevalent, right? In the 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, as the Gemara in Sanhedrin speaks about. And even though Y2K and the year 2000 passed rather uneventfully, in the end it may have been a message of a different sort. Everything called Poinat Bal Olam B'Shvil Yisrael, the Gemara says, all punishment comes to the world for the sake of the Jewish people. Not that we necessarily the cause of it directly, that we carried it out, but whatever happens divine providence-wise, hashkachically, is somehow to transmit a message to the Jewish people, right? The bigger the event, the bigger the message over here, right? So, especially since Y2K, Yud Beis Kuf, because Y2K stands for year 2, Kuf, the K is 1,000, so the year 2000, which is also called the Millennium Bug, right? But Y2K is a very interesting name, right? Happens to spell a very specific Jewish word, right? The Torah says that Yaakov got up that night and took his two wives and his 2 maidservants and his 11 children and crossed over the Yabok crossing. He took them and all that he owned across the river and returned. He's going to fight with the angel, right? So Yaakov remained alone. A man, angel, wrestled with him until dawn. But when he wasn't able to defeat Yaakov, he touched the hollow of his hip, the Ginanasha. Yaakov's hip socket became dislocated as a result of wrestling, right? Of course, his name was changed to Israel. The stranger said, "Let me go, done as a right," because he's got to go back to Shemayim to praise God, right? And he said, "I won't let you go until you bless me," right? I won. So he says, "What is your name?" He says, "My name is Yaakov." He told him, "No longer will you be called Yaakov, but you are now going to be called Yisrael, the namesake of the Jewish people, because you have fought with an angel and with man, and you have prevailed." That's the name that Yisrael actually means. A lot of depth and meaning in that specific name is what we're all called. Basically, a very extremely important, central, seminal turning point in Jewish history, right? Thus, the Yabok River was a legendary place that Yaakov, the twin brother of Esav, crossed over in order to be able to become Yisrael. So the Yabok River is where it took place. So what difference does it make? Is it just incidental information? Turns out that it's not incidental. It means a lot more than we might have thought. So why? Because, as the Arizal says, again, relying once again on Sod for the insight into historical importance and significance of specific things, right? So the Arizal writes, "A man who only performs positive mitzvahs merits the nefesh called asiyah." This is very Kabbalistic, the conclusion of what counts for most of it. But he's basically saying that anybody who works on doing the mitzvahs asa, the positive mitzvahs, it's a low level of spiritual accomplishment, so therefore he's only going to merit a low level of spiritual consciousness and connection to Kodesh Baruch Hu, to God. He's like a man, he's like a woman, he's similar to a woman whose husband has gone overseas and has left her without clothing, food, or drink. There's not much connection over here. He's like the Shekhinah that sits in exile and darkness while her house lays in ruin. That is what a nefesh of a person is like without a ruach, which is its husband, so to speak, without light and intelligence for understanding. In other words, to live in a very low level of Torah perception means to deny yourself a deeper and more fundamental understanding of how the world works and how Hashem works in that world, and how we can work with the Shekhinah to bring ourselves to perfection and the world to perfection, to fulfill the mandate of creation, right? So it's a very low level, and you'll get schar, you get reward, but you deny yourself the intellectual understanding and spiritual greatness that's possible to go from higher levels, right? If this person then tries to learn Torah constantly, learning it and teaching oral law for altruistic reasons, L'Shem Shemayim, right? A person now goes further. They're learning Torah. They're understanding the ideas behind the mitzvahs as much as possible. They're learning Torah Shebal Peh, like the oral law, right? Then he will merit the level of ruach from Yitzirah. So now he has the nefesh from doing the positive mitzvah, because that's like the action, right? And now the learning of Torah, which is like spoken, it's breath. So now he's getting the level of soul on a higher level called ruach to accompany his nefesh. So he will be like the woman whose husband has arrived to live with her forever in the house. What a happy ending to the story. Clothing her, feeding her, giving her to drink, and bringing her to a higher level. Such is a person whom ruach comes and dwells within his nefesh, filling it with the spirit of wisdom, elevating the nefesh from Asiyah to Yitzirah. So the fact that he gets the level of ruach now elevates the nefesh, just like, for example, somebody who begins to associate with a person at a higher level of intelligence. It's going to be mashpia. It will influence. It will give him extra knowledge he himself wouldn't necessarily have, and more pleasure, more understanding in life. Likewise, that's what happens to the person who goes the next level up and gets their ruach. If a person then endeavors to learn the hidden wisdom, the secrets of Torah, so Kabbalah, right, the more esoteric areas of learning, then he will merit to receive an neshama, which is from Bria, the level up. There's Asiya, then Yetzira, and then Bria. Asiya means action. Yetzira means formation. Bria is a higher level, which literally means creation. These are all Kabbalistically explained, right? Corresponds to Neshama, that level. And it will give off light from within the Ruach and cause even more elevation. So now, the person who is now hanging out with a guy on a higher level of understanding, and the two of them are now hanging out with a professor or a big more to home, a Rav or a Gadol, somebody, they'll both be mushpa. They'll both be affected and influenced, and each one will benefit from the higher level of learning, right? Then he is called an Adam Shalem, a complete person, which the Torah happens to call Yaakov after he gets to Shechem, after crossing the Yabok, after he becomes Yisrael. To which the pasuk refers when it says God made man in his image. Then the person becomes the fulfillment of being a Tzelem Elokim, living in the image of God. The sod is as follows. This is the basis, the more Kabbalistic understanding of the entire idea. When a person only possesses nefesh, then he is only affected by the name Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, a low-level name of God, so to speak, that is associated with the lowest levels of revelation, the world of Teva, the level of Malchus in the spheres, the level of Nefesh in the soul. So a person only mushpa, he only derives spiritual energy from this reduced Gilui of Hashem, of the Shekhinah, of the reduction of the light of God, right? When he learns Torah altruistically, then he merits the Ruach, which comes in the name Gud Kei Vav Kei. That's the tetragrammaton name, the ineffable name, as it's referred to. And that's the name we don't pronounce the way it's written because it's very holy, it's very high level of Gilui. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, the Kohen Gadol would pronounce it. We don't do it today until Mashiach comes. We instead use a different name in that's written the proper way. We don't say it the way it's written, right? And but he's mushpa from that level of God's revelation. When he learns the mysteries, the Kabbalah, the Sod of Torah, then he merits neshama, and he will draw down strength and blessing from the name Aleph, Hey, Yud, Hey, Ekya, right, which is the name that Moshe uses when he goes down to Mitzrayim to talk about the upcoming redemption, a very, very holy name. Now, when all three names come together in the person, you add up the gematria of all three, the gematria pasha, no kolel, no mysterious permutations over here, just the actual numerical value of each of the letters, and you add them all up, they equal in total 112, which happens to be the gematria of the word Yebok, Yud Beis Kuf, right? So the Arizal, he completes the statement, the thought by saying, with respect to him, it says, right, Hashem save, God save us, right? Hashem Shemay, right? May the king answer us on the day that we call it, passage from Tehillim, which has the head letters of Yebok, Yanenu V'yom Karenu, on that day. Which day? The Gul, the final redemption. God should answer us, right? But the Roshi Tevis, the first letter of each of those words, Yanenu V'yom Karenu, Yud Beis Kuf spells the word Yebok. So you have to assume that the word Yebok is extremely significant. The idea, the concept of Yebok is significant. So by crossing over the Yebok River, physically he did that, but conceptually it was more important because he went from being a Yaakov to a Yisroel. That's the point over here. He went from Yaakov to being Yisroel. Yaakov is the name of the Shem Begalus, the name of the Jewish people in exile, right? And the Yisrael is the name of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, which is why it's called Eretz Yisrael, the land of Yisrael. So the Yebok symbolizes, which we see as a function of Torah and learning and going from Pshat to Remes to Drush to Sod, is the process of going from a lower level of neshama, soul, to a higher level of soul, to a lower level of revelation of God, to a higher level of revelation of God, till eventually you get to the whole concept of what we call Gula Shlema, the final redemption. So thus it says regarding Yaakov Avinu, who became Yisrael, that Yaakov arrived complete, as we said before, Shalem, as he gets to Shechem. Thus was Y2K, a spiritual Yebok, that the Jews of the generation were supposed to cross over to become Yisrael and stop behaving like Esau, his twin brother. Because don't forget that we're twins. Yaakov and Esau are twin brothers. Just like Yaakov can be just like Esau. If you look at the Jewish world today, how assimilated we can become, the intermarriage, we can become better Americans than the Americans, better Canadians than the Canadians, better English, better British than the British, better Greeks than the Greeks. We have a historical tradition, unfortunately, of blending in and becoming just like Esau himself. We can be just like him in every respect. And likewise, the Pope wears a kippah, a red one, the color of Esau, Edom. But nevertheless, they also have a certain connection to religion, which we take for granted. And so much of it is based upon the Old Testament, the Bible, the Chumash, the Torah, because there's a connection between Yaakov and Esau. So sometimes that can serve us well, but for the most part, it usually means that we have left our path and we're no longer pursuing Kosh Baruch Hu and fulfilling the mandate of creation is supposed to be, which Hashem puts up with for the time being. But after a while, when history gets to a certain point, a case where things have to change, we have to start acting the part of Yisrael, not just the Yaakov. So every time we do it, every time a person does tshuva or leaves behind the ways of Esau in any way and becomes more of a Yisrael, as opposed to a Yaakov who's the twin of Esau. So it's personally crossing your own personal Yabok River. Right? Yabok is a conceptual spiritual reality. It's a physical tributary of the Jordan River, right? And the word Yarden itself is Yerad Nun, as in the Nun Shari Bina come down there. That's a sheer unto itself. But as much as it's a physical river, we see that it's also a conceptual river, a river, so to speak, of knowledge that we have to cross over and to ascend to higher levels in order to be able to connect the Kosh Baruch Hu Torah and ourselves on a much deeper, more profound level. So the question becomes, Me'ez Hashem Haisa Azos, right? He needless beinenu. Y2K caught the attention of the world. It cost us $64 billion to fix. And as much as it was a dud in terms of causing the computer chaos it was predicted to cause, the reality is it stuck out in the minds of everybody. In the 6th year of a Shemitah cycle, and all kinds of cultures were talking about Messiah. Mashiach happened to also coincide with the year 2000. Obviously, it's Y2K, millennium bug, but 2000 was the year that the Christian world was waiting for what they call the second coming, because that itself is all part of the messianic atmosphere. In the end, they're going to be wrong. In the end, it's not theirs. It's not the Muslims' version of Mashiach. Eventually, the real Mashiach, Ben David, will come. But part of the hachana, part of the preparation of the world and the Jewish people is to create events that make people think along messianic lines, much more so than they might have otherwise. In the end, that's definitely what happened over here. And the transformation is extremely pronounced, and history has not recovered, especially since we see what came after it. A very important event that transformed everything, to change the course of history unto this very day, right? Which we'll talk about as Hashem in the next session.